Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into China's colossal real estate crisis. It's an incredible story of ghost cities, unbelievable debt, and broken dreams that is seriously shaking the foundations of the entire global economy.
I want you to just imagine this for a second. You've worked your whole life, you've saved every single penny, maybe you've even sold family heirlooms, all to buy your dream home. You sign the papers, you pay for it all up front, and you wait. And then, years later, you go to see your brand new home, and what you find is nothing. Just a concrete skeleton, no workers, no windows, just the wind whistling through these empty corridors. Well, for millions of people in China, this isn't some nightmare. This is their reality.
Because this isn't just a story about finance or economics. At its heart, this is a human tragedy, and it's on a scale that's almost impossible to wrap your head around, all playing out inside these vast, empty cities of concrete.
And the Chinese have a name for these projects, Lanwei Lo. Literally, it translates to a rotting tail building. The image it creates is just so powerful, right? It's like an animal that's been left to decay in the sun. It perfectly captures that sense of total abandonment and rot.
So what do? You've lost your life savings, you still owe the bank, and you've got no choice but to move into these dangerous, unfinished buildings. People are covering empty window frames with plastic sheets. They're using tiny solar panels just to power a single light bulb. And they're carrying these heavy buckets of water up flight after flight of stairs. I'm talking the 18th floor or even higher, every single day. It's a primitive life inside the shell of what was supposed to be a modern dream.
So the big question is, how did this happen? How did the factory of the world, a country famous for its economic miracles, end up with this massive concrete graveyard? Well, it really came down to three key ingredients.
It really all kicked off back in 1998 when China privatized housing. And that just unleashed this national obsession with owning property. Then you had local governments who were starved for cash, and they discovered a gold mine, selling state-owned land to developers. This whole land finance model became their number one moneymaker. And finally, the pre-sale system took over, which allowed developers to collect the full price of an apartment before a single brick had even been laid.
And this just created an absolute frenzy. I mean, the stock market was volatile, banks paid low interest, so property became the only trusted investment. For your average Chinese family, real estate wasn't just a home anymore. It was their savings, it was their retirement, it was their entire future. A jaw-dropping 70% of all household wealth got tied up in property.
Now, just to put that into perspective for you, in the United States, about 30% of household wealth is in real estate. In China, it's more than double that. That kind of concentration means that when the property market starts to shake, the life savings of an entire generation start to shake right along with it.
And right at the center of this hurricane were these huge developers, these behemoths like Evergrande. They weren't just building apartments. They built a business model that, looking back now, looks an awful lot like a Ponzi scheme. It was this giant house of cards built on borrowed time and borrowed money.
Okay, so here's the playbook. It's pretty simple. First, they'd borrow a massive amount of money to buy a piece of land. Then, they'd immediately pre-sell all the unbuilt apartments, collecting all that cash right up front. And here's the trick. Instead of using that money to, actually build the homes they just sold you, they'd use it to buy more land. They were constantly using cash from new buyers to pay off the debts from their old projects. It's a cycle that only works as long as prices keep going up and new money keeps pouring in. For almost 2 decades, this system fueled an absolutely unprecedented construction boom. But by 2020, the central government in Beijing saw the writing on the wall. The debt had become astronomical, and the risk to the entire financial system was just too big to ignore. The party was over. The music had to stop.
And the signal for this massive change came in a single, powerful phrase, straight from President Xi Jinping. And believe me, this wasn't just some casual comment. This was a direct order to cool down the dangerously overheated property market.
The policy that actually did it was called the Three Red Lines. This was way more than just a set of rules. It was a fundamental shift in China's whole economic philosophy. The era of growth at any cost was officially over. It basically told the banks, look, if a developer is too indebted according to these 3 metrics, you are forbidden from lending them 1 more cent. For companies like Evergrande, who were living on a constant IV drip of new loans, this was a death sentence. The pin had just popped the balloon.
And the second that credit was cut off, the entire system just froze. The collapse was immediate, it was catastrophic, and it unleashed a crisis not just of debt, but of faith in the entire Chinese dream.
First up, Evergrande, the symbol of the boom, defaulted on an unbelievable $300 billion in debt. To give you some context, that is more than the entire national debt of many countries.
But here's the scary part. Evergrande was just the tip of the iceberg. The much bigger, hidden problem was the debt held by local governments. Through these things called Local Government Financing Vehicles, or LGFVs, they had racked up an estimated $11 trillion in off-the-books debt. That's according to the IMF. That number is nearly half the size of China's entire economy.
So this economic meltdown has now triggered a really profound social crisis. That promise that was made to a generation, that if you study hard and work hard, you'll get a home and a secure future, that promise feels broken. Youth unemployment has skyrocketed, and a whole new social movement has popped up. Tang Pang, which means lying flat. It's where disillusioned young people just give up on the whole rat race of getting married, getting a mortgage, and buying stuff.
Now, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, that's a huge mess, but it's China's problem, right? Well, not exactly. A crisis of this magnitude, it doesn't really respect borders, and the fallout is already spilling over into the rest of the world.
The impact really is global. These Chinese property giants, they build ghost cities abroad too, like the $100 billion Forest City in Malaysia, which is now almost totally empty. But more importantly, with their own domestic demand collapsing, China is now trying to export its way out of this crisis. It's flooding the world with cheap electric cars, solar panels, and batteries. And this is sparking major trade tensions, because the US and Europe see this flood of cheap goods as a direct threat to their own industries.
When you step back and look at this whole saga, it's hard not to think of that ancient myth. It's the story of Icarus, whose father warned him not to fly too high.
So is this really a story about a housing crash, or is it about something much, much bigger? Is it about a 40-year economic model, one fueled by unsustainable debt, finally meeting the laws of gravity? For 4 decades, China flew higher and faster than any nation in history on wings built from debt. And maybe it got so intoxicated by its own rise that it believed the fundamental rules of economics just didn't apply. But now it has flown too close to the sun, and the wax is melting. And why this matters to all of us is that the fall won't just hurt China. A crisis this big will shake the entire world.